also who is not required to be the have an access to the information. That helps a lot. Till the end moment, a panel with a dedicated staff to look after the entire thing. That helps a lot, actually.
Okay. So thank you.
Just in a lighter vein,
Yes,
just in a lighter vein. So Ashwath sir, actually you mentioned about CBI that when they present the evidence, they go beating about the bush. Just just on a lighter vein. Actually, see, we have 3 levels of supervision. When there is an IO collects all the evidence, he examines the witnesses, he examines the accused, etc., and also he studies the evidence. And this is actually reviewed by 2 other officers. So there are 3 levels of review, and after that it goes to the law officer also. So after all that, we actually prepare the charge sheet. So I don't think in CBI we get the very perfect evidence, and whatever investigation that we are doing now, I think unlike the other organizations, yeah.
No, sir, it's correct. Efforts will be more in the CBI, but the thing is, they will not pinpointing the situation. That will be the problem. In so many cases, I openly said that our officers, our police constable is better than one CBI inspector. I showed it example. In some cases, of course, their efforts are very good. For example, I say that I will disclose it now. So in the mining case, collected evidence is one room of 5 officers were there. So I wanted to frame it. I wanted to hear before charge and frame a charge. And before that, I had to hear the bail application. So where the prosecutor started to argue for about 10 days, 15 days, but that was not at all necessary at all for that person. I did just look at the charge sheet, main charge sheet, and I did not look into the boxes also. So I said, this is the what we wanted now. They collected so much of evidence. Of course, they will find at that particular point of time, they will find it material. But while presenting the charge sheet, and we have to see what is the offense and the ingredients of offense. Then only if you pinpoint it, it will be easier. In several cases.
In fact, learning from all the bad cases and learning from all the good cases, we have definitely has a lot of things to learn in that. In a failure case, what really gave the person an acquittal, that's a good matter of learning. In a conviction case, what actually made the person to be convicted, again, a good learning. So ultimately, what you people are trying to understand and make us understand is that the need of transparent investigation and the need for logical justification in anything which you bring in before the court of law. I understand that. Thank you very much.
Actually, for investigation, we have a plan of investigation. When we get when there's an offense committed and there's FIR registered, and when the IO actually begins the investigation, there's a plan of investigation. We actually set out to collect the evidence. What is the type of evidence that we want to collect, etc. So it is authentically collected and evidence is presented in the right way.
That's it.
So that is.
And see, for every law enforcement agency, there is a lot of procedures involved, and for all the benefit of the audience, we must also understand when we see a person is acquitted from a particular major crime, it is not that he's actually innocent. It could also mean that there has been a lot of discrepancies in the documentation or the procedural aspect. That also leads to acquittal in many of the cases. That's what we just have to understand with this discussion. While I'll call upon Mr. Satish, sir, we keep seeing a lot of frauds which get suddenly unearthed. Okay, we see businessmen arrested for several crores of IT, scam fraud. Or suddenly, presently, we could see a UCO Bank, role in unearthing the present ongoing Valmiki, scam. Valmiki Sangha's scam. So, what do you see as the role of a banker? Because we are so far discussing about fraud investigation in very general aspect. I want you to specify as a banking point of sector as to how the frauds, what you see as a anti-money laundering. Can you just highlight and what is anti-money laundering, and can you give a couple of examples, and then we understand what is the need for such monitoring as a fraud prevention or a fraud investigation?
Yeah. See, when it comes to the banker, see, in one of the lectures, one of the seniors, they have highlighted and they have told that the bankers are the managers of the economy. The entire economy, what is driven now, what is policies, RBI policies are made, ministry has made few policies. The implementing authority is the banker. He has to ensure end-to-end policy compliances, including the risk mitigation, risk management, so many things he has to ensure. And then he will be delivering the day-to-day things. It's a continuous process. And as you rightly said, the frauds, what is happening? There are, when Sharat Chandra sir was telling operational risk, that is where the frauds happen inside. That is, when it comes to operational risk, there are so many aspects in that. When the banks have a strict operational risk guidelines, we have a risk management committee and boards and other things, everything will be routed through that. It's a set of guidelines which is issued by the Ministry and Reserve Bank of India, and individual bank boards will be regularly reviewing the things committed, and it is reported by the internal mechanism of the bank. Every banks have a set of board for that, and it will be placed before the board, and then it will be reported to the RBI. Once it is reported as a fraud to the RBI, then it will come into the public domain. So then only the public will come to know that the fraud has been committed, and the next course of action, if it is based on the amount, Sharat sir will be knowing, based on the amount of the fraud, it will be given to CBI, and then the investigations happen as discussed by Sharat sir and Ashwath sir. Those processes will go on. But as a banker, the major responsibility of the banker will be to avoid all these things.
Sir, let me just give you a scenario right now. Suppose, okay, there is a bill which we procured from a local electronic market. Okay, we
Okay.
paid by cash.
Okay.
Okay, so is this a good transaction, or as a banker? When
Definitely
we're
not.
discussing about fraud, risk, and prevention, how do you
Yeah,
look at the situation? What is your comment?
No,
on it?
this what you said is earlier we were discussing about AML in one of the sessions. See what are the AML? I tried my best for around 45 minutes to the interns and the students. Finally, as Panindar sir is asking, I asked them one question: where did you go yesterday? They told we visited some Wonderla or some place. How did you pay to the entrance? They told, no sir, we swiped and POS machine or card something. Why didn't you pay cash? No sir, they won't accept cash. So that's where I told them and tried to make them understand what is AML. Wherever cash transactions, as Paninder sir is telling, some transactions which are genuine and which are converted to cash. For example, in the market, whenever you go, I think the panelists or the participants will be knowing it, and they would have experienced or they would have committed this. If you go to a shop, he will ask, sir, whether you want a GST bill. That is the question asked to everybody. If I'm a genuine financial person and having a financial discipline, I say I don't mind paying GST. I'll go with GST bill. Next, if you don't pay the GST, the amount of transaction what we are doing will come down. We'll be earning some 18% of the GST. But what will happen to that 18%? What we are thinking that we are saved? That particular channel of saving that 18% will be accumulated in a larger amount. And this forms a loop, and people who are evading this tax will be having some surplus out of their balance sheet. Normally what happens, the balance sheet will be drawn on every year, and making money in the balance sheet is the profit, and that nobody can evade or nobody can transfer to other person. But how to make money out of the balance sheet? That's where the diversion of funds come. And for diverting the funds, so many means are used, like taking a transaction in the cash. Suppose there is a business enterprise, we won't find that everything is transacted through account only. There will be some a cash transaction. Maybe for few organization, cash transaction is very limited, petty cash or general charges or some few things which are to run an office. But intentionally, people who are doing into these cash transaction will finally end up in doing the anti-money laundering activities.
Okay.
That is being checked by the banking industry and the RBI very thoroughly, and that's a huge subject to talk about anti-money laundering. But cash transactions, yes, of course, it will lead to the anti-money laundering activities, and ultimately it will be funded to a wrong doing and not in the interest of the nation.
In the interest of audience to understand what context you are referring to, suppose the question is posed to Mr. Santosh Murthy. So when it comes to a company like what Satish sir mentioned, company has a bad, a transactional history. And when you are invited to understand how this company could be taken over by another company or company merging, okay, how do you assess the risk factors in this kind of
No, in
cases?
that case, the entire Mr. Prasad also can help me out further in that case. The entire audit takes place. Like we will do the third-party audit of that entire company, keeping in mind all sorts of transactions. We'll see the entire financial history, the vendor transaction history. Basically, the vendor transaction history comes into a larger picture here. When the panel with the third-party vendors also here, how was the transaction done? What was the agreemental contract, which is major principle of any contract between a third outside party and the company? How was the payment being made over here? So the AML comes into picture here only. If there is no, I don't want to name certain industries also here, certain companies which I've worked into. Most of the companies also today do cash transaction, but to show that there is no cash transaction, to create a dummy agreement also. So that's where Enron kind of a Satyam issue starts up and pops up. So a thorough investigation has to be done to cross-check. Whenever the merger and acquisition takes place in such kind of companies, we have to investigate in detail actually. If it is a 5,000 rupees contract also, if it is a 50 lakh rupees contract also, how was the payment being made? And what was the reason in the terms and conditions scope of the work also? Because the scope would be different and the payment would be different over here. So these are the basic facts which we have to check it. Yes, sir. Satish, sir.
Sir, the word cash, CASH, is exactly not cash.
No.
We call it currency. And
Yeah.
what I want to just put into the mind of youngsters who are here, it is not only cash. It can be converted by way of kind also. So these things will also happen. Cash means the youngsters may understand that it is currency, how we show it in the film or somewhere that cash is given down the table. That is a old theory. Now, in a corporate or some business house, if you want to make 10 crore rupees out of their balance sheet, they cannot count the currency. There are other ways and means where our role as seniors or investigators or people from various sectors have to pass on the knowledge to the next generation. If suppose they are working in that environment, they have to pass a bill. For example, they have to pass a bill after a conference in some hotel or somewhere.
Now, Satish sir, I would like to call upon Sharad sir to just narrate in any of his investigation was to prescribe the medicines or the products of that particular pharma company. So recently there was a guideline given to the doctors not to participate in that. Well, coming from this background, yes, Sharad sir, you had to
one more thing before Sharad sir, one more thing I want to add. As a banker, I am telling, see, I have been taught by my seniors, whenever we go for a unit visit, suppose, how a junior has to go for a unit visit. I normally in my entire career or my entire fraternity, normally avoids going with customer taking to his place in his own facility, that they will tell, no, you do it on your own. So there also these things will happen. So just Sharad sir would have conducted so many banking frauds and investigation. This aspect of visit to the unit is the major thing. While on the way to the visit to the unit, so many things may happen. That's where the bankers will never go with the customer for a bigger unit visit or other things. So Sharad sir will be knowing it because in his investigation, many things would have come during the course of travel to the site. These things happen. So
Sorry to
will be
interrupt once again. In the name of protest of customary, these things do happen generally during the time of Diwali. Diwali gifts are meant for that, so it will be rightly and precisely
100%.
given as an example. Over to you, Saraj, sir. Sorry.
Yeah. See, my role in CBA, actually CBA has got a technical advisory unit. So that comprises chartered accountants, specialist officers, because my parent department was income department, so I went on deputation to CBA. So I was deputed to the technical advisory unit, and I'll have to advise CBA investigations in income tax matters. So, and all accounting matters also. So I was associated with disproportionate asset cases where the public servant amasses wealth which is disproportionate to the known sources of income. That is one type of case. So I was associated with that, and some of the bank cases also, bank investigations. Now see, the thing, all this white collar crimes, all this corruption happens. Like what Satish sir was telling, that money need not be received at all. See, I might be a public servant. There's a transaction between me and the person, the private party, and I need to get some benefit, some monetary benefit from that. I need not even receive the money. So I can, like, if my children is studying abroad, somebody will pay the fees for him there. So there is no money trail. So essentially in a money laundering offense, money laundering is nothing but criminal proceeds of crime. You try to layer it, to disguise it, and then you bring it out as white money. So laundering is just washing the dirty money and bringing it as clean money. So you try as much as possible to avoid the trail without being detected, and then you bring it out and then you invest it. So money need not be received in kind, but there are a lot of bribe cases which we have done. Redundant. I'm taking the money, but there are instances where you need not even receive the money. So yes, to disguise the trail, yeah.
Ashwat sir, my question to you is directly on this. Okay, while in your career of being a presiding officer, you would have seen many cases coming to you for adjudication. In addition to what you had to mention about comments of Mr. Sharad, I also wanted to highlight on what are those skill sets which you always, in general, missed out from the presenting officer. Matlab presenting officer, matlab the prosecution or the people who come up with, what are those skill sets, those qualities which you always found in this particular case?
Sir, this will come only at the time of concluding the case, arguments, at that stage. When we'll point out this deficiency, they will feel that they want to reopen the case and they want to collect the evidence. Of course, it will be very difficult to collect the evidence at that stage. For example, one thing I will tell. In one, what is that one? Encounter case. In encounter case, the police, of course, it was a notorious roadie. He was encountered. It's a matter. They gave a pistol to him. There was evidence to show that it was fired, but it was not working. Subsequently, the evidence shows the ballistic expert shows that it was not working. But he says that there was evidence of firing. At that particular time, there was heavy rains in that area. When the person, the deceased, the person who suffered the death, who shot that fire, had no signs of marks in his head, in the hand. When, of course, when we fire the bullet, the residues will be in the hand, but that were absent. So there was no evidence at all from the prosecution. Then I put one question I was put at the last stage. What happened there? Why there was no such evidence? Even the other side was also no answer. But what I want to do is, of course, he was a notorious roadie. The officers we have to protect the officers. So what I was said, because there was heavy rain and the dead body was in the that water for about one and a half days. So that might have been gone. Like that, I gave an explanation. Of course, it was confirmed in the High Court also. So this minute reason, they need to be intentional, but because it's a human error, they may miss.
So
Normal, because in that case, as I said, there was lots of evidence, unnecessary evidence they collected. They concentrate on main other matters. They forget about this intrinsic matter. So this is the problem. And
Yes,
what I want to add to Chandra, one case, of course, it's not necessary to be in money only. In one case, I saw a MD seat was given to the daughter of that person.
Exactly.
Also, it's a famous known case also.
Well, for the benefit of all the participants, while we are discussing about the certain level of investigation, what you have to understand is that the ground reality is the need for proper investigation. When you actually understand the law, when I say law, it might not be our Indian laws what we're discussing. It could be the bylaws or the operational guidelines of your particular role or your particular organization. Every such situation has a law which is binding on it. Suppose your company has to purchase something that has a law binding on the company. When we say law, it is not that. That's what I mentioned. It has a procedure to follow. You have to ask for 3-4 different, quotations. What are the best quotation? You will actually give the order for them, and the person to be eligible to give the quotation should be meeting up with 1, 2, 3, 4 criteria. Those things are your internal procedures, and the procedure itself is to be considered as the law for the purpose of your local operations.
See, basically, this is the first time it was defined in a Supreme Court case, actually in the year 1998, in Kamalaben Panjabhai Solanki, daughter of deceased case, actually. Basically, in IPC itself, fraudulently and fraudulent has been widely used, but it's only defined in one section of section 25, actually. A person, but not otherwise. If there is an intent over there, then the picture of crime comes into picture. Then the cheating comes up, whatever the deceitful act is done, it can be forgery or anything else. For example, recent Porsche case of Pune, the intent of saving that boy in the entire family is defrauding the entire mechanism by grandfather, father, the doctors, and the mother also by giving her blood sample. It's a fraud of creating a forgery of the evidence, manipulating the evidence.
Yeah.
This is the intent, which is the major thing, actually. The right example at this present stage, so that everyone can understand what is the case, actually.
The mens rea.
Mens rea, that's for sure. The intent should be more looked into it, actually. And how with the entire organization in large, or the entire society in large, or the person who has been deceived for that person has been impacted for that purpose. So that is the main thing which is to be looked into.
Fine. Prasad sir, while I had to bring you in for this question, while one of the participants has sought for you to give a briefing on a particular case study as to what it actually is meant as fraud and risk mitigation strategy. Can you give me a real-time example of successful implementation of fraud and risk mitigation strategy? If you can just give a scenario and the strategy, what you had to suggest in that answers the question of the participant.
Okay. So in most of the action is that before they commit a transaction with any third party, it goes through what is called deal review board, where they assess the risk involved in doing a particular deal.
So can you please repeat the term, because I think your network was stuck.
Hello, sorry. So it is called a deal review board, okay, or a risk management board, or a deal committee, whatever name you call it. Finally, what happens is that all the people who sit in that board will decide whether I actually go ahead with the business transaction or not, number one. If at all I'm going ahead with the business transaction, whether I have complied with all the organizational policies. Number three, is there a risk involved in doing such and certain transaction? And therefore, if there is a risk, how to avoid it? And so on and so forth. Once they're through with this, then they typically get into saying, go ahead. After you start going ahead towards the transaction, then they also definitely look at the third-party risk. Because today's in this world, third-party risk is one very biggest risk. It comes because of your vendors, your mergers and acquisitions, your suppliers, and so on and so forth. So in the third-party risk element, let's say, for example, as somebody was saying, how do I get that cash back in the process into my pocket rather than getting documented? So some of these issues, how do we deal with it? So how do you actually select the vendor? Whether vendor has the process which respects your organizational process. All of this is actually a part and parcel of the game, which will be run for each and every transaction. Okay, it is not defined by the value. It has to go through that process. And even after that, as Sir was saying, that fraudsters are innovative and they keep on improving their tricks of the trade, and therefore they will be much ahead of the most best innovators in the country who are trying to do good. Therefore, yeah, sometimes you encounter, unfortunately, some of these issues.
If in case they want to enter into any corporate, what would
Yeah.
you suggest their best designation?
I would say that, in the context of risk management in large corporates, your journey should start from a risk analyst role, okay, typically, because every organization documents the risks, and the risk analyst role is very, very critical. And then they have to rate the risk on a scale of 1 to 10. And then you also look at the mitigation part. And then you will come into the investigator role. Therefore, you become a junior risk investigator or junior investigator of incidents, for example. And then you will be part of an incident response management team where you would try and see how you act on it, so on and so forth. And depending on whether you are on the prevention side, whether you are on the cure side, as we discussed in the past 15-20 minutes. So it depends on where you are coming in, and accordingly the designations would get fixed. But I think in an organizational hierarchy, you have anywhere between 5 to 6 levels. And ideally, the people who are starting these courses, of course, Satish sir has seen a much larger banks, etc. But in the corporates that I've seen, you have 5 to 6 levels before you ultimately want to reach the pinnacle side of that, that function, which is essentially about the handling or managing or preventing the risk. And especially if you are coming to some of these big four organizations, be it KPMG, PwC, etc., you have a huge, a lot of partners who handle this risk itself. And they're very heavily paid, to be very frank with you, heavily paid, because the organization's health and the backbone and the visibility and the entire business runs on how do you handle the risk. And therefore, I believe in the world where we are economically growing in India, and also the technology is coming, and which is also creating some amount of risk for the day-to-day operations, I believe that all these professionals will have a great future.
Fraud investigation has to choose banking as one of their domain. Okay, suppose I just want you to highlight about the risks involved in giving a simple loan. What are the procedures involved, and what does these people would be taking care as an investigation is concerned? Please.
So when it comes to entry level, suppose as a banker, normally there are two entry levels, that is clerical level and officer level. When it comes to officer level entry, the day one, they will be exposed to the risk, that is financial risk, immediate. So they have to take certain decisions, credit decisions and other things. And this course, what exactly we are going to introduce, will help the people who are getting into the sector. See, getting into public sector banks is a little bit a procedural. We have a IBPS exam 2 level and all they have to clear. And what I came to know after this 3 months of study into this sector, that is what we are going to do, how we are going to train the people and the next generation in the banking fraud investigation, suppose. So there are opportunities, and the sector has opened up now. The new designations are coming up. As Prasadji was mentioning, see, I've come across one of the designation called Loan Processing Fraud Manager. That's the new designation coming up. It's already there in abroad, and other foreign banks are already implemented. So what will be the role of a loan processing fraud manager? So processing of a loan, it starts from taking the application. When the